Hello everyone. So in this video, I want to take a look back at Venus. Venus is now direct, moving through Leo for the final time, making its final set of aspects. There's a very interesting thing happening. While Venus is doing these final squares, square to Jupiter soon, then Uranus, the inconjunct to Pluto, Juno is also joining Venus. So check this out here. I want to show you this. Keep your eye on this Juno Venus. On the 9th or so, Juno joined Venus. Now, usually Juno moves a lot slower than Venus, but because Venus has just been stationing, Venus is incredibly slow right now. It just began moving direct. So from the 9th up until the 28th, they're right next to each other. And then finally on the 28th, Venus passes Juno. So there's a lot of correlation here. There's a lot to unpack, especially given the potency and the significance of Venus right now. Right? It's that morning star. It's gaining momentum. It's completing a cycle in Leo. It's doing the final of 3 aspect sets to several planets. There's a lot of culmination, clarifying, integration, completing, and moving on energy with this Venus. And I would just say in general, this Venus direct gaining clarity and power in Leo does speak to a return of self-dignity, self-value, self-clarity. There's an important dimension that's added to this with Juno. So what I want to do in this video is share my reflections on Juno, what I'm learning, how I understand Juno right now. And I really do emphasize the right now quality of it because I more than other archetypes, I feel that Juno is really not just for myself, it's really revealing itself right now. I think we have a lot to learn, and I think we're learning a lot about what Juno has to teach us. So I'm excited to articulate this and bring this into more clarity and formation. And then I want to speak about what it means right now for Juno and Venus to be together, sharing all of these aspects, moving through Leo. We're going to speak all of this with respect to the fact that Venus is also the ruler of the South Node, right? I mean, there's just so much to unpack here. Venus is the ruler of the South Node, so anything happening with Venus really speaks to a core theme right now in our relationships. There are essential clarifications, realignments happening in our relationships. With the North Node in Aries, the ongoing theme, and I've spoken about this, really speaks to this claiming of individuality and my own will, my own direction, my own purpose. What does it mean to claim the unique quality of my own soul purpose, to be a leader unto myself, but then to bring that into my relationships? We're healing a lot of the adoptive, codependent, people-pleasing patterns that come with Libra. So we're really wanting to respect that there's a strong healing dynamic happening in the Venusian Libra realm right now. It's immense. And I'm not going to focus so much on that dimension other than just setting the stage for that. So the final thing that I'll point out is Mars is the ruler of the North Node, but it's right there completing a cycle with Libra during this time that the ruler of Libra is with Juno. So there's just so much emphasis right now on healing and clarifying and bringing a very particular kind of wisdom and awareness and realignment within our relationships. Let's talk about Juno. So the common associations that many of us have heard with Juno is Juno corresponds to marriage. And it does. There are actually, I don't know of any other asteroids, maybe there are, I'm sure there are, that has such a direct correlation with what we call marriage. And more broadly, it's where we come into a contractual relationship with another soul. There's a commitment, there's a union on some level taking place. And many of the correlations that I've always heard about when it comes to Juno speaks to this idea of, your soulmate relationship or your ideal union. Um, and I'm not going to say that that's not true, but I am going to emphasize that when it comes to Juno, more often than not, what actually happens is we enter into contract, we enter into relationship, and the dynamics are not easy. Just look at the mythology of Juno and Jupiter. It was a marriage where the very foundation of the marriage itself was sort of rooted in an incongruency, in a dishonesty, in a sense of not really feeling deeply fulfilled. Jupiter was, having affairs and doing whatever he did, and Juno was unmet, unloved. She wasn't being met or seen or regarded as the queen that she is. And of course, that then led to a lot of jealousy and non-healthy manipulative behavior. And this is where Juno often will show up in our life as double binds, or these agreements where we get stuck. I would say, and I don't usually associate rulership with the asteroids in the traditional way, but energetically there's an association, there's a connection with Libra and Scorpio. I think Demetra George in her Asteroid Goddess book, I'm not sure, I think associated Juno with Libra and maybe also with Scorpio. And this makes sense to me energetically because we come into these contracts, and it's not just intimate relationship. This can be within the context of any kind of agreement, any kind of contractual relationship, any state of union where two people are coming together. If there isn't that full conscious choice to give, to really make this agreement, if I'm saying yes, but I don't really want to say yes, I'm going to find myself psychologically feeling stuck and entrapped. That's the Scorpio dimension within a dynamic that I don't really want. But we will often exchange, I'm going to do what I don't want to do so that I will feel wanted, or I need to feel powerful in exchange for you feeling desired. And there are all these things, and I've spoken about this recently with the Jupiter. When Jupiter and Venus were squaring each other in the last square, I spoke about this beautiful teaching that I heard from Andrew Huberman, and I actually think that this has also been spoken about more in depth by a man named Dr. Glover. He wrote a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. I've just seen him around YouTube. This is where I heard of the idea of covert and overt contracts. This is, we can definitely say, a Venusian Libra dynamic. But when it comes to these long-term commitments, which is more of a Juno thing, meaning Libra itself doesn't speak to marriage. And that's an important clarification. Marriage, in the way that I look at it, in the way that I correlate it with astrology, is more of a Scorpio thing and definitely a Pluto thing and a Juno thing. Marriage is a form of relationship, and thus it corresponds to Libra from that point of view, but marriage isn't implicitly connected to Libra on its own as an archetype within itself. Libra is relationship. It doesn't speak about duration or depth of commitment or a particular kind of relationship form. The energetic of commitment, of union, of coming together, where there's sort of a growth or an investment and a growth that happens through that investment, that's specifically Scorpio, okay? So we bring that in. Now we're stuck in some kind of agreement, some kind of contractual relationship. This is where, within the context of a covert agreement, covert contract, it's a natural tendency to find all these ways to kind of get our power back. And most of these aren't spoken, right? Exchanging desire or being desired for being liked. Usually two people aren't saying that. So it created some level, either a double bind or a double standard. Some dimension of our own agency and power is going to be locked up in the thing that we're trying to get and the way that we have to give in order to get that. So, of course, we can recognize a part of the Juno work isn't just like matter of fact, that's how it has to be. But I can tell you, and this is where I can find some level of authenticity in this blossoming exploration for me, because in all the years I've been reading charts, I put the asteroids in there. I'm not deep, with all the asteroids, but when there are strong correlations with Juno and how it's aspecting the nodes or whatever, I will observe it. It's clear as day. And I've seen these patterns and these themes recur many, many times. And so the question becomes, what's the healing? Like, what's the healthy? And this is not something I can claim to fully understand, but I can recognize there is a deeper teaching and potential and gift, a healing, a tikkun, a realignment within the Juno archetype that I think as a culture in general, as an astrological community, you can say as well, and as a society, we haven't really grasped. And here's why. Many of us are looking for a union, whether it's a marriage or a deep relationship with deep trust and bonding. And I can absolutely say that in this day and age, there is so much healing, so much healing and so much psychological awareness around behaviors and how we show up in relationship. And there's so much more space to look at things right now, and that's great. But we're on this arc of healing, and there's so much more to learn still. If you think about, for the most part, what is the model of committed relationship or marriage or union in the world, there's a very high divorce rate. There's a sort of norm that's still prevalent, be it gender norms or even just assumptions around what it means to be in commitment. It's still not the norm to really be looking at the truth, right? For two people to come together and to be radically honest with each other up front. To be radically honest up front. These things are worked out. Most people, after a certain number of years, it gets too intense and it's not being worked out, and they terminate or they move on or whatever. And there are all kinds of nuances. And I'm not trying to be down on any form of relationship at all. I'm just making a statement of sort of obvious observation. As a society, we have a lot to learn about what it really means to engage relationship authentically as a healing path. I think the higher dimension of Juno, what I'm intuiting, and this is just an intuition, the higher dimension of Juno is where there is a deep sense of freedom, because there's an agency and a recognition of equality, not equality in terms of like we both do the same thing, but equality in terms of each individual being a full, equal, sovereign being within themselves. And the knowledge of that and the ground of that is the foundation for trust. Trust is built, in my understanding, through the experience of giving with no ulterior motive, and through being given to with no ulterior motive. And that only happens when we feel good about ourselves, when we're not looking for something out there, we're not being dishonest, we're not making these covert agreements. So I think there's a possibility of a union where each individual becomes this gift and this support for spiritual evolution. And this is when, Jeff Green talks about the idea of soulmates in his second Pluto book, and his definition of it are two souls that are aligned on a spiritual path that aren't working out their own karma. And he specifies that the archetype of soulmate would only apply to souls that are operating on a shared spiritual path, meaning they're at that point in their own evolution where they're able to engage relationship at that level of consciousness, meaning the relationship doesn't serve the purpose of seeking to substitute my ignorance of who I am and my own wholeness through the dependency on you treating me or giving me something, which again, I think that's sort of the underlying current in most relationships. It's beyond that. There's that inner commitment. Then two souls coming from that place, the giving is immense. It's an unspeakable dimension of healing and potential from that state. So I intuit that's the higher dimension of Juno. We have the mythology, and of course, I don't think there are any mythological stories that speak about relationship on that level. Do you know of any? From any culture? If there is, I want to know about it. I'm very curious. In the limited knowledge that I have, I've most mythological stories from any culture always has some element of tragedy and subservience and grief or loss And of course, these patriarchal constructs are just sort of built into them. So I think there's a deep growth and healing in our learning about the greater potential of relationship. And I think through the lens of Juno, this is something that I suspect and sense is still wanting to really be understood and worked with. And I don't know if I've come across charts. This is a thing for me to really start paying attention to. And again, please let me know if you've seen this too. If you're giving readings and looking at charts, I don't know if I've come across charts where I see that Juno archetype manifesting on that level. I mean, I think that would already say something about that soul, about those souls together and their level of consciousness. So meanwhile, we're healing, we're learning, we're bringing more integrity and clarity and agency and wholeness into our present, into our relationships. And I had this thought recently, just like, what is it like to be in any kind of relationship where everyone's in total agreement about what they're doing? I was really thinking about this. There's a feeling of delight and gratitude that comes in that, even if it's mundane, even if it's as simple as buying something at the store. When I really want to be buying that thing that I want to be buying, and if the cashier who's helping me buy that food really wants to be there, there isn't any sense of I'm only doing this because I need to make money, right? Like, we can make these covert agreements with ourselves, and usually they're honest, right? Usually they're like, I'm aware that I'm sacrificing something, but I need to do this, right? But the beauty of actually being in a place where our mind and our heart, our whole being wants to be there. We're not in conflict with ourselves. When I'm not in conflict with myself and you're not in conflict with yourself, there's just gratitude. There's that recognition. And there isn't much to do about it other than, well, what wants to be? What's chosen? Right? What's the agreement? Usually it's just, thank you. Do you want cash back? In that example. But it leaves the heart open and joyful. And I think it's just really, it's beautiful to recognize moments of congruency in our life, so that we get more familiar with recognizing, that our mind becomes more trained to recognize and notice the feeling of that kind of relational congruency. So bringing this to Venus, now we're really looking at this archetype of commitment and marriage and union and the contracts that we form and the deeper dimensions of healing, really connecting that with our relationship, which are very broad. And now Venus specifically speaks to self-value and our needs and how we extend that and share that and ask for that within relationship. So it's really emphasizing, what are we doing? What are we doing with each other? What are we doing right now? What's my intention? And again, we can think of this not just in an intimate context, anything that we're committed to within a relational context. There's a calling to really give attention to, do I love how I feel? Do I feel good in myself? Do I feel good about myself? Doing this, saying this, engaging with this. Because this Leo is very emphasized right now in restoring and renewing this dignity and this value, this sense of my life has holiness. I am living a temple. I am claiming this purpose, this agency to be entitled to create and enjoy myself here. Do I love what I'm doing? I just bought Rick Rubin's book. I really want, I think I got an email that it just arrived. I'm really excited about it. It's about the creative way, or I forgot what it's called. I've been loving listening to him. Wanting to relish and just swim more deeply in what it's like to actually care so much about my embodied experience of what I'm doing. Do I love what I'm doing? And this is like clarifying, I can't do this, I'm not allowed to, or here are the expectations of the roles of the agreement. These are the things to clarify. Even if there's no one saying don't do this, we get our mind stuck, and that's that Libra dimension of trying to please everyone. One thing Rick Rubin said about the creative act, you don't create for your audience. The audience only expects what they know. And so they're never going to be the right gauge for you to do that next thing that you haven't yet done. You create for yourself because you enjoy it. And I've heard him say too, I think it was him that said this. It was him. When you really are in touch with the thing that you love doing the most, you just want to create time to do it. You'll even get another job to do it just so you can pay the bills to do it. Like, you won't need to make it the thing that you earn money for, right? And I get that. I really understand that. I really understand that. That's what it means to say, I'm doing what I know I'm meant. Like, there's a relevance in that Leo energy that says, this is where I come alive. And there's a path that opens there. We don't even have to control it or even know it or try to fit it into any kind of known box. So Jupiter and Juno, as they're going to be walking together, you can see this is the day where they complete the conjunction. Let's go to where we are right now, which is Wednesday, the 13th. Juno is very soon to square Jupiter on the new moon, actually just as Mercury is stationing direct. It's a very, very powerful few days we got coming up here. And then Venus is going to square Jupiter just the next day. Yeah. So the remainder of this week is emphasizing now telling the truth. Jupiter retrograde in Taurus, not what you're convincing yourself, not the values or the ideas or beliefs that you're trying to make real for yourself, but what actually is true. And it's helpful to remember that truth isn't an answer or some sort of defined value that we can use to measure against anything that we want. Like, it's, this is what I'll do in the future, or this is exactly what it'll look like, or here's like, we can't control the energy of truth. Truth is actually always what's self-evident. It's what we do know. That's it. Truth is what we do know. And from a Jupiter perspective, it's not like this larger cosmological like absolute answer to all of creation. Even though Jupiter is philosophical and cosmological by its nature, the starting point for all insight is our own sincerity. When we get lost in abstraction, we may not be in our own direct experience. We might be more in thought or ideas or previous experiences. So really to look honestly at what is. So this is honest listening. Looking honestly at what is means honest listening. Honest listening means honest listening. Really valuing other people. Venus, Leo, Juno, Leo. Respect one another. Really respect one another, but really respect yourself. So honest listening means honest communicating, honest listening to yourself. These are really important themes right now. So you progress this. This is really interesting. So once Venus and Jupiter finish that dance and Venus, crosses ahead, they're obviously going to still be very close to each other for a while. And they all, within a few days, move to square Uranus. Right? This is all for the rest of the month, just after the full moon. So that's almost like all of this work is like the truth telling, the clarifying, getting really real and honest, and like clarifying self-value and love and respect and dignity, all these beautiful things that I'm speaking to. And then this Uranus square is just like, insights happen when the space is created for them. That's all I can say. We can't force them. There's an algorithm, there's a flow to all things. That's my experience. Like, everything is sort of falling and getting into the place that it's meant to. It happens as we don't interfere with the process. And so sometimes what's coming into place might feel sort of disjointed with our ideas of where it's going. But that's where Uranus says and teaches us, don't have too many ideas. And it's kind of nice. Like, we're preparing the ground with this Jupiter of this being really honest and knowing what we know and being sincere. And Uranus says, there's more that we haven't seen because of our conditioning, and what wants to be is just outside of the box of everything that we know, but it's all towards greater congruency. And that's the beautiful thing about all of this. Better congruency, and just to appreciate, sometimes there's an appearance of disarray or disorder before things can sort of recalibrate themselves at a higher, more clarified level. And again, it's meaningful to appreciate this Venus Juno is going to be trining this North Node in Aries. So it really is emphasizing this quality of self-leadership. And as I mentioned, Mars, the ruler of the North Node in Aries, is moving to the South Node during all of this time. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter to the South Node. The actual conjunction with the South Node, is like on the 3rd or 4th of October. And it looks like around then, is when Juno and Venus sort of passed that 24-degree. They finished the square, so all the Taurus energy. We will have a yod with Neptune at the apex to Venus and the South Node of Mars, and that's going to be another really cool thing to talk about. But it's very clear that moving up until that time, and then for sure, there's a whole other phase coming up in October, big time. This is cultivating self-leadership within our relationships. This Mars dimension is really asking us to bring a lot of agency and consciousness and leadership into our relationships, not to get reactive, not to be unintelligent in how we approach things. There are choice points here, or at least conscious decision points to be engaging in helpful and useful ways. Mars is always going to instigate and move a lot of energy. So it's an engaging, exciting time. I mean, this season in general, but this month in particular, there have been so many powerful alignments that are so heavily relational oriented, but in really essential ways. I've never seen alignments so focused in that way. So those are some insights and thoughts about this Juno-Venus conjunction. And just to end this with stating, you can tell the moon's moving in October, moving to the sun. Mars passes, and we're going to have a bunch of eclipses on the nodes, right? After all of this, these eclipses also squaring Pluto. So we're in for a really wild ride the next couple months. May it be healing. May it be really healing and heart-opening, and may we find more joy and value and appreciation for ourselves and for one another. Reminder that the first ever online Evolutionary Astrology Conference is happening in October. Let's actually show the date for that. Boom, right there, October 6th to 8th. This is going to be a weekend with 14 or 15 astrologers of the Evolutionary Astrology teachings, many old-time astrologers. I'm going to be teaching on Uranus and subconscious submerged memories from prior lives and how that influences or imprints our perceptions. We have many fascinating, beautiful topics. Posting a link in the description below. If you join, you can use the code Pluto and get 10% off. If you become a member of the association, you get $50 off and access to last year's class series, 9 classes. So feel free to get in touch if you have any questions about that. And thank you so much for watching.